Gentlemen Slumpbusters, you can count the Los Angeles Rams as your Super Bowl 56 champions with a 23-20 victory over the Cincinnati Bengals. Not an upset by any means, as the Rams went all in on this season, acquiring Matthew Stafford in the offseason, acquiring OBJ just after the deadline, and Von Miller prior to the deadline. So the Rams pushed all their chips in the middle of the table, and it paid off for them with the thing that most NFL teams covet, think about when they go to sleep at night, and dream of. My first question to you, Kyle, is with Matthew Stafford winning his first ever Super Bowl, can we go ahead and lump this into the breaking of the Georgia sports curse? I mean, former Georgia QB after all, right? Goes up there with Stetson Bennett as a champion, and the Atlanta Braves, of course.
No, I don't think this one counts. That's a little too big of a stretch to try and count that one. Matthew Stafford, in fairness, little bit of a disappointment at Georgia. I'm just going to throw that out there for all of you to discuss in the chat about Matthew Stafford, who I believe Mel Kiper said in his junior year of high school, he was going to be the number one pick in the NFL draft. And he was the number one pick in the NFL draft. I think this adds to the lore of Detroit sports just being terrible, just terrible.
I may be wrong on this one. Was he the Georgia quarterback that got to beat the shit out of Hawaii?
Possibly. I'm not 100% sure, but he also had AJ Green and I believe finished third in the SEC East one year. I believe that's a real thing. I may have to fact check it, but I believe with him and AJ Green, they finished third in the SEC East.
You had talked about this being an indictment on Detroit football. I would say this is where coaching matters, because Sean McVay, we knew how good of a coach he was. And we just said, well, they don't have the most dynamic quarterback here in Jared Goff. So insert Matthew Stafford. I don't think he was leaps and bounds a better upgrade over Jared Goff when you actually start to really look at the numbers and look at the performance. There was a reason the Cooper Kupp was the Super Bowl MVP. By the way, congratulations, Cooper Kupp. Is because Matthew Stafford did have some terrible interceptions during this game. Matthew Stafford did lead the NFL in interceptions, but Matthew Stafford did just enough, if not more, in those game-winning drive situations than Jared Goff could ever dream to do to cap off what the Rams failed to do 3 years ago and take home a Lombardi, or I guess stay home and win a Lombardi, because the Rams didn't have to travel that far. They are the second team in 2 years to win a Super Bowl in their home stadium. So add that one to the history books. I guess we can officially mark that curse as officially dead, if it wasn't dead last year from Tom Brady breaking it.
I guess this means that the Arizona Cardinals are going to win the championship next year, right? Like, they've got all this drama going around with Kyler Murray being unhappy and DeAndre Hopkins backing him up and Christian Kirk saying, hey, he might request a trade. And they're going to win the Super Bowl next year because the Super Bowl's in Arizona, right? You go 54 years of NFL football and then back-to-back years, the team wins the Super Bowl in their home stadium. By the way, the corollaries between the 2020 Bucks and the 2021 Rams, both teams about the third best team in their conference benefit from an upset loss by the Green Bay Packers, get to the Super Bowl with a team that has a really struggling offensive line and doesn't play their best game, but still does good enough to win the Super Bowl. Oh, also switched quarterbacks the year before, and in their first year with a new quarterback, they end up winning the Super Bowl. So maybe this is a sign that the Los Angeles Rams, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and the Arizona Cardinals will all switch quarterbacks and ultimately win the Super Bowl over these last 3 years.
Some similarities, not directly, because the Bucs actually had to beat the Packers and went in there, and at least for the first half, were dominating. And then Brady just said, let's make it a little interesting. Let's throw some picks and let Rodgers think he has a chance. So different, but same in some regards. As far as the Arizona Cardinals, I would not advise taking that bet, but that is also my inclination to doubt Kyler Murray, and also my inclination to strongly doubt Cliff Kingsbury. Although I have doubted Matthew Stafford for years, and Matthew Stafford proved me wrong. So there is some points in time where even I have to take my foot off the gas of pumping that haterade. And in this particular instance, yes, Matthew Stafford is a Super Bowl winning quarterback. Now we can start having that discussion of larger legacy for Matthew Stafford, as he's the 12th all-time passing yards leader. Now he has a ring, some Pro Bowl appearances. It's on the table now to start talking about Hall of Fame careers, now that he at least has that monkey off his back. Let's talk about some other guys that got the huge victory here. Obviously, Odell Beckham Jr. is going to be a story. He didn't get a finish off the game. He seemingly messed up his knee. I can't tell you how severe that is. I haven't seen any injury reports come out as of the time of this recording. Good on Odell Beckham Sr., right? Gets his kid out of Cleveland and gets him into LA and into a Super Bowl championship. parade. Talk about dad.
Yeah,
of the
we
year
can now
material.
officially conclude that 8 years, the New York Giants and Cleveland Browns, who I would argue are the two worst run franchises in football. And that's a high bar to hit. There are a lot of really poorly run franchises in football, but I'd argue the Cleveland Browns and the New York Giants, they take the cake. Speaking of New York Giants and Odell Beckham, Matthew Stafford is officially Eli Manning. So congratulations, Matthew Stafford. You are officially Eli Manning of your generation. And Eli Manning doesn't belong in the Hall of Fame, but he's going to get in the Hall of Fame because it's name and legacy that will get him in. I'm not going to let us go any farther here, 7 minutes into this, without mentioning Aaron Donald, because Aaron Donald, the man, is one of the few non-quarterbacks that impacts the game like an elite quarterback. And Aaron Donald gets to have the end of game play that takes down Joe Burrow, put a ring on his finger, and hopefully he walks away and retires at 31 years old because the man has nothing left to prove. I know he could go on to break the all-time sack record or whatever that,
so he does have
stat compilers do.
Well, you have something.
No, that's just stat compiling.
There's people above you on the list. You have something to prove.
Sure, but that's just stat compiling. Those stats don't have anything to do with how great or how poor Aaron Donald is. Aaron Donald's the greatest defensive tackle any of us have ever seen, at least you and I being in our 20s at this point. So of the 21st century, he is the greatest defensive tackle that any of us have ever seen. And everyone was happy for him to win the title. And the Bengals offensive line allowed 6 sacks in the equivalent of 17 minutes during the game. And Aaron Donald, you deserve your props, even if we want to talk about Matthew Stafford at Georgia and Odell Beckham's dad first and foremost. Aaron Donald deserves all of the props for a Super Bowl MVP worthy performance for the Los Angeles Rams.
Well, if we're going to mention Super Bowl worthy performances, then we should talk about the Super Bowl MVP, that Eastern Washington product named Cooper Kupp, which is Hunter Renfrow on steroids. Cooper Kupp, just route running, touchdowns, yards, wide receiver triple crown, capped off with a Super Bowl MVP. That's the cream of the crop. That's about as good as you could get out of a wide receiver position. We get up arguments back and forth all the time about should a wide receiver even be considered for the MVP. I think it's too hard, just because if you're putting up stats as a wide receiver, then by virtue your quarterback is putting up stats. In a one-game sample size, I think it's justified, just because we could pick apart pieces of Matthew Stafford's game in the Super Bowl, whereas you look at Cooper Kupp, he's just doing everything perfect for them to cap off that game-winning drive, including being matched up against Eli Apple, because Eli Apple getting cooked in the Super Bowl. Shout out to the preview, by the way, because man, he's slipping that apple pie joke, and it feels like it paid off here. I'm glad, that's good script writing. That just hats off to the script writers there, just right here.
Yes, hats off to you, Juju. I give you all of the props in the world for pointing out that Eli Apple is not actually that good at football, although he was a top 10 pick. So shout out to Eli Apple for still being very talented.
And who was he a top 10 pick by, Kyle?
The New York Football Giants, of course. But I think that was pre-Dave Gettleman, so I don't think I can laugh at Dave Gettleman for that one. Still, welcome to a 10-year anniversary of the Giants Super Bowl, by the way. It has been 10 years since the New York Giants won a Super Bowl, and I would like to welcome them to another decade of mediocrity. It's funny that we mentioned the Giants as well, because you talked about wide receivers and MVPs and things like that, and this is now 2 of the last 4 Super Bowls where a wide receiver has won Super Bowl MVP, and it's a one-game sample. Those ones are kind of weird in that way, but if you go back through the last 8 years of NFL football, the only wide receivers I can think of who are like the best of the best in the NFL that had incompetent quarterback play are DeAndre Hopkins for those 2 years with the Texans before Deshaun Watson, and Odell Beckham. Odell Beckham is the most talented wide receiver I may have ever seen in my life. And Odell Beckham will not be a Hall of Famer because of a combination of injuries and shitty quarterback play. And this is kind of the crux of wide receivers, is that all the good ones at least have semi-competent quarterback play. Cooper Kupp with Jared Goff is a very good receiver, and then he gets Matthew Stafford and an offense built around his strengths, and all of a sudden he wins a triple crown at wide receiver and becomes Super Bowl MVP. Doesn't make Cooper Kupp any less great. It's just the reason why the Los Angeles Rams won the Super Bowl in a year where the Kansas City Chiefs, as you can see by the jersey I'm wearing, didn't get to destroy them in the Super Bowl like they inevitably would have if they hadn't blown the lead to the Cincinnati Bengals. The testament to Cooper Kupp was Thank God on that last drive, Sean McVay said, we're just going to throw to Cooper Kupp, because everyone talks about all the time, like, you're going to double cover Cooper Kupp. What are you going to do about it? Jamar Chase was being guarded perfectly by Jalen Ramsey and still made a one-handed catch for 46 yards down the sidelines. At some point, Cooper Kupp's just unguardable. The Bengals don't have anyone as good as Jalen Ramsey on their team. They can't guard Cooper Kupp. We saw it on the last play where Stafford just said, I'm just going to throw up a fade to Cooper Kupp, put it where no one can touch it except Cooper Kupp, and we're going to win the Super Bowl. Now, Aaron Donald's going to help us win the Super Bowl, but we're going to win the Super Bowl by just throwing the ball up to Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp very much deserved the Super Bowl MVP. Him and Aaron Donald are the reason that the Rams were good enough to win the championship, as well as having a Hall of Fame coach at 36 years old who has been to 2 Super Bowls and has now won one of them.
And let's talk about the loser standpoint, what this means for the Bengals. Will they be a team that we can see back in the playoffs next year? I have a lot of faith in Joe Burrow. I think he deserves to be mentioned more in those young 20-something quarterback conversations we have, because I feel too often Joe Burrow just slips through the cracks in those conversations, because you look at the AFC, I feel like he's not talked about in the same way that Patrick Mahomes is. He's not talked about in the same way that Josh Allen is. And he's not talked about in the same way as even Lamar Jackson is. It's kind of a shot at Joe Burrow, considering he's now taken his team further than any of those guys. Well, aside from, of course, Patrick Mahomes, but you would also say with lesser talent. Jamar Chase probably is on a trajectory to be a Hall of Fame wide receiver, but we already knew how good Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce were before Patrick Mahomes ever started for them. The Ravens, better talent than the Bengals. I mean, certainly the Bengals were a team we're talking about as a 7-win team coming into the year, and they were in the Super Bowl. So the Bengals, looking at the AFC North, projecting a little bit here, you imagine the Steelers are going to take a step back with questions they have at quarterback. There's questions for the Browns, even though they have a quarterback. Question. They have that talent on that roster still, whatever that means for them. The Bengals should still be around, don't you think?
Yeah, the Cincinnati Bengals are, again, with no one changing their rosters yet, like obviously there's still a lot of moves to make. The Bengals are essentially like the 4th or 5th best team in the AFC. I still think the Baltimore Ravens are as good as the Bengals when healthy. If they just have Lamar Jackson can elevate the talent around them the same way that Joe Burrow elevates the talent around him. Obviously, he doesn't have a Jamar Chase.
Well, we look at the Bengals and we see an obvious flaw. Everyone sees the flaw. The flaw was very well seen during the Super Bowl. You talk about the 6 sacks in 17 minutes. If I'm the Bengals, I'm almost tempted to use all of my draft picks on offensive line. Whatever free agent capital I have, I'm using it on offensive line. If I can make
it's a lot, by the way. The Bengals have the 4th most cap space in the NFL this offseason.
If I can make a trade, get someone like a Trent Williams, I'm not saying actually Trent Williams because I love my big guy, but I'm saying someone like a Trent Williams in a trade is out there. The Bengals, if they just fix that, think how good this team could be. There's still some pieces that need to be worked out on the defense. Obviously, again, the secondary, we saw the issues with Eli Apple being that opposite corner of Chidobe Awuzie. And that's obviously going to be one big thing that the Bengals are going to have to fix in the offseason. But if they just get that offensive line right, you're still going to have Trey Hendrickson and some of these guys they signed along the defensive front for a couple of years, including their linebackers. Obviously, Jamar Chase isn't going anywhere. You have him on a rookie deal. You have Joe Burrow on a rookie deal. They could be back. They could be a force to be reckoned with in the AFC North. Will they be back in the Super Bowl conversation? That's ultimately just going to be how good can Joe Burrow become, because this is a season also removed off an ACL injury. So there's still possibility that he could get healthier, he could get smarter, he could advance more towards the NFL game.
This is something that I said on the Take It Easy podcast. I think I'm going to use this pretty often now because it sounds perfect for what I'm trying to encapsulate when I talk about Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow is his generation's Andrew Luck. Joe Burrow, in the first 3 years of his NFL career, is going to take them to a Super Bowl and to take the Bengals to another playoff with very minimal protection on the offensive line. Andrew Luck, in his his second year, made the AFC Championship game, and the following year went to the second round of the playoffs. The Colts committed crimes against football by not giving him an offensive line and destroying that man's body. I don't know if the Bengals will do the same. We don't really talk about the fact that Joe Burrow might have injured his knee again in the Super Bowl tonight after he had reconstructive surgery on 3 different ligaments in his knee last year. Joe Burrow is essentially his generation's Andrew Luck. Is Andrew Luck the most talented quarterback that I've seen? Yes. Was Andrew Luck the best quarterback at any given point? No, he was not. Joe Burrow is not as good as Patrick Mahomes, but Joe Burrow doesn't have the same team as Patrick Mahomes. He's not as good as Josh Allen, but even then, they kind of have a comparable team there. And the Bengals defense does have some shortcomings there. Like the Bengals defense, as much as we give them props for going from like the 27th unit in DVOA to the 7th best defensive unit, they've got some issues in the meantime.
And Zach Taylor isn't Andy Reid.
Mm-hmm. And also, Jamar Chase is as good as Tyreek Hill, but they also have Travis Kelce on that offense. So, there's a lot of weird pieces in there. The Bengals were not good enough to win the Super Bowl this year, but they were also good enough to beat the Los Angeles Rams tonight with every good thing that went their way, whether it be the face mask on T. Higgins for the 75-yard touchdown, whether it be generic white guy receiver for the Rams dropping a pass that got intercepted by the Bengals on the first play after the 75-yard touchdown, whether it be Eric Weddle, who was called off the street for the Rams, then having to wear a giant shoulder brace, losing Odell Beckham, Robert Woods, and Tyler Higbee, so that generic number 88 as a tight end was their second best receiver. Also completely shutting down the Rams running game. Like the Rams couldn't do anything running the football. All of that worked the Bengals' way. And the only thing I could point to and say didn't go well for Cincinnati was the offensive line. And I'm amazed that was enough to still not win the game. Obviously, the Bengals should have forced overtime. They had 2nd and 1 at the Rams 40 whatever yard line, and then threw incomplete pass. Joe Burrow took the sack at the end by Aaron Donald. So they probably should have gone to overtime. The Bengals, under normal circumstances, would have been exposed earlier on in the playoffs this year by a healthy Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens defense, by a Buffalo Bills team. And they did get exposed by the Kansas City Chiefs. The Kansas City Chiefs just barfed all over themselves in the second half of that game and allowed the Bengals to get to the playoffs. So under normal circumstances, the Bengals would have gotten exposed early on in the season. They just happened to play the Raiders and the Titans in the first 2 playoff games and benefited from the Chiefs barfing all over themselves. And by the way, should have beat the Rams today. They got all the good breaks go their way, and the Rams physically fell apart.
Aside from that holding call there at the end.
Perfect confluence of events get them a Super Bowl.
Aside from that late holding call, which I'm sure that's going to keep Bengals fans up late at night. I'm sure Blake is screaming, our good buddy Blake. But anyway, guys.
But he wasn't screaming when T. Higgins blatantly face masked Jalen Ramsey. I'll tell you that.
Oh, that was a James Harden flop, and you know it.
No.
Enough of it. James Harden's a Sixer now. We'll talk about it more on the podcast. Anyway, guys, well, let us know below your thoughts on the Super Bowl. Was it an expected result? Did you lose all your money to Vegas? From Juju Talk Sports, Kyle Ledbetter, stay safe, happy, and healthy. And damn, we got to think of off-season content now. Now the real fun begins. We'll see you next time.